The organisation Undoing Tax Abuse says it welcomes Transport Minister Barbara Creesy's announcement that the driving licence card machine tender award and contract will be investigated. The group says the tender for the card machine has been deliberately manipulated to ensure that a specific bidder was awarded the contract. Outa CEO Wayne Duvernay joins us for more. Wayne, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for speaking to us. Now, you were in conversation, from what we understand, with the minister. Just bring us up to speed with some of the key aspects of that conversation before I get to specifics on what we're hoping you'll unpack for us this evening.
Yes, hi, thanks, Hugo. Firstly, we've had a number of concerns in many departments of the Department of Transport, from SANRAL, where we have a board that is overreaching and questionable expenditure conduct that has been taking place, to the matters happening at the ATNS, the Air Traffic and Navigation Services, and the RTMC, the Road Traffic Management Corporation, RTIA, the Road Traffic Infringement Agency. The list goes on, Hugo. So we really have been looking for some time to engage with the ministers for a number of years, by the way. And Chikunga, the previous minister, Sindisiwe Chikunga, had indicated she would meet with us over a year, but never did. Prior to that, we struggled to have a very brief meeting. That was about tolls with Fikile Mbalula, the previous minister. But there'd been 8 ministers over the last 12 years or so. And for the first time, we have a minister in Barbara Creesy that in a very short space of time reached out and said she would meet and listen to what it is we have to tell her about the things we know. And we know a lot because we work with a lot of whistleblowers. And the driver's license matter was one as well. And as you can recall, on 2 Mondays ago, on the 2nd of this month, the department had announced that it was going to issue this new driver's license, the smart card tender, to IDEMIA. We were well into an investigation on this matter, and I'd urged her to please receive the information we were going to give her and put a halt to this announcement or this award until it has been properly investigated, because we believe, and we can see it has all the hallmarks and all the red flags of tender manipulation and rigging to favour one entity.
Okay, so they're 2 conflicting bid amounts, but I'm going to get to that in a moment. Now, you have mentioned multiple irregularities in the procurement process. Can you detail how these irregularities were uncovered and what specific steps the driving license card accounts allegedly took to manipulate the process, in your view?
Okay, there's quite a few. I'll just try and simplify it. First of all, this tender has been put out between 2021 and 2023 3 times. And we know of a couple of other times prior to that. But we get into this period of 2021 to 2023 where the tender's put out. They get a lot of people interested. Tenders, by the way, these type of complex tenders take a while to put together because you've got to get your partners involved, you've got to get your suppliers involved. It's costly, and there's a lot of technology that goes with these smart cards. And then they cancelled it. And then they put it out again in November of 2022, and it was cancelled. And the second time it was cancelled, there were a number of tenderers that weren't even notified that the tender was cancelled. They weren't notified that a new tender was put out in March 2023. Now, this is highly irregular. You just do not behave in this manner if you're serious about the people who are bidding for this contract. So some of the tenders went back and said, well, why was it cancelled? They weren't given meaningful answers. But they were told that they had been disqualified anyway because they hadn't met the criteria, and so they were allowing the tender process to take place again. Lo and behold, when they went to get some of these tenderers their contracts back, their tender contracts back, they were told that they hadn't met certain criteria, which means the tender process could not reach the pricing contracts, which were sealed, the pricing bids, which were sealed. They found that the pricing bids had been tampered with and opened. 2 of them, by the way. So this is tender manipulation, and that you just are not allowed.
Let me understand this process. Sorry, Wayne. So if tenders are submitted, right, and the adjudication panel invariably will sit and inspect the tenders, correct? Now, is the pricing separate from the rest of the document? Because one would imagine that.
So what happens?
So let me finish my question. So one would imagine that when the documents come through, if I'm part of that panel, my 7 colleagues and I will open, will inspect, and then we'll realize, oh, none of these guys meet the requirements, but we've seen all the documents. Or is the pricing separate?
Yeah, it is separate. So what happens is 3 parts to the tender. There's first the requirements of the administrative process. So do you qualify? Do you have the tax clearance certificates? All of those things, the competencies, the management team that you require, and all of that proof has to be provided. Once you pass the administrative process, you go through to the technical evaluation. Our technical evaluation is, are you able to do this job? Do you have all the various requirements that we need for you to be able to print these cards? And there's a number of questions. There's 30 points that is earned in that space. So if you don't pass the first part, the administrative part, you don't even reach the second part. They don't take your evaluation into that space. So 5 companies in the last tender had submitted their tenders. 2 of them were knocked out in the administrative round. So there were 3 left. The technical part has to be evaluated, 30 points. You need to get across the hurdle of 24 out of those 30 before the bid adjudication committee, bid evaluation committee may go into the pricing. So it may not touch and look at the pricing until you have passed that the technical hurdle. And these companies were told they hadn't passed the technical hurdle. They were given their documents back, and the tender, the pricing element had been tampered with. So that is a big concern. They've taken photographs of these of their envelopes that have been tampered with. They asked them what had happened here, and they were given some runaround story, which is unacceptable because the bid evaluation committee has to ensure that those are not tampered with, and they did not ensure that. But that's the small part of it.
That's a small part.
I mean,
let's hear the big part.
So when you, here's another issue. In the one cancellation where I said they weren't even notified, prior to that, there's a period where you are asked to hold your prices for a validity period so that they can go through the tender process. The first part of that was for 120 days, 4 months. The tenderers are asked to hold their prices. And the Treasury are very clear about this. You don't mess the tenderers around. You don't extend those. If you do, it has to be very rare occasion and a very good reason to do so. They asked the tenderers, please, can we ask you to extend your bid, your proposal beyond that first 120 days? So reluctantly, they do so, because if they don't, then they get struck out. They just, okay, you don't want to extend the validity period, you're no longer in the running. They have to go and get permission from their suppliers and partners and so forth. On the second occasion, then they asked again. So now you're going into the third extension of this validity period. You're going into a year now after they've handed in their tender. On that occasion, one of the tenderers said they got a notification on Friday afternoon after 4 o'clock asking for permission to extend the validity period, and they had to answer by 5 o'clock and close of business on that Friday afternoon. Less than an hour was given to the tenderers to give permission to stay in the race and allow that validity period. That is grossly.
Let me throw at this.
It's abuse.
Let me throw this at you, Wayne. One would imagine that if these individuals who are in the system were corrupt, right, and were trying to manipulate the system, that they would do this manipulation with some finesse, right? Now, sending a request for an extension at 4 o'clock, expecting a response within an hour, does not show finesse in any way. How much of this is just ineptitude as opposed to individuals actually being corrupt?
Well, let me tell you what the sentiment and the feeling is from the tenderers. At the final bid, what they have is a briefing meeting for these submissions to be made. You have to come to the briefing meeting for a tender. There were 25 companies that came, and now this is after they'd been cancelled a number of times. It ended up that only 5 companies tendered, so there were 25 interested, and a lot of them had tendered prior to. And their views when you speak to them was this organization, the DLCA, Driver's License Card Account, which is the Department of Transport, was doing everything in its power to wear down and whittle out people in whichever way they can. So if you say, look, I've had enough, I can't hold these prices anymore, I can't get hold of my partners, they're pulling out of the deal. And that's what happened, by the way, on a couple of them. Partners just said, look, we can't keep holding these prices, just pull out of the deal. What happens then is you get less and less people in the race. And what we saw in this specific one is that IDEMIA was the last man standing. They were the last ones to cross that last hurdle. Everybody else had been knocked out. And then when we looked at that technical evaluation, we saw questions that were so obviously points not given to tenderers that should have been able to provide the technical specs that they would have required. When we checked with those tenderers, they said they have all of those specs that indicated it clearly. So here's a case of point manipulation in the evaluation process as well. So, I mean, this list just goes on and on, Hugo. It's amazing. It's to us, it's not ineptitude. It's brazen. It's flouting of the processes that it's just obviously they're trying to ensure that this tender goes one way. And then you start to see the pricing, and the prices in two different documents are very different. And then you hear of AXA, or 2 weeks prior to that, firing and cancelling a contract with IDEMIA because of tender manipulation in their contracts. Then you start looking into the media around the world, and you see this pattern is a regular pattern. So as far as we can see, and there are a lot more, and we've got evidence to show this, that this contract and this award has been so grossly manipulated and so rigged that it just cannot go ahead. And we are very confident that the Auditor General, when they do this investigation, will agree with us on that front.
So what specific outcomes is Outa hoping for from this investigation, and what additional steps should be taken if irregularities are indeed confirmed?
Well, if what it looks like it comes out, I think firstly it must be cancelled. Secondly, I think on the back of the AXA tender and then this company should be struck off any future business with government. In other words, they should be placed on the restricted suppliers database, never to pop up anywhere else where they are. And by the way, there's also questions about some of the other tenders and contracts that they've won in other departments. But put those aside. What we then want to see is not just that the contract is cancelled. The people inside the system that have allowed this to happen should be taken to task, should be held accountable, disciplined, and not only if they are found guilty of participating in tender irregularities and manipulation, they should be disciplined, fired, and criminally charged for the conduct that they've participated in. Because the problem in this country with so much of the corruption we see is that there are no consequences when people are found wanting. And then put this tender out and do this properly. Get independent people in to have some oversight on some of these contracts. These are big contracts. They are multi-billion rand contracts over long periods of time. We cannot have these games played in this day and age after state capture. The mind just boggles, Hugo, as to how much corruption and how much manipulation continues to this day.
Now, Wayne, if the contract for some reason is not suspended, what action is Outa considering, such as pursuing legal action or a court interdict? Because from where you're sitting and the conversations you've had with Minister Barbara Creecy, you are hoping that, as you said, that the contract will be cancelled and those responsible taken into account. If that does not happen?
If the contract isn't cancelled, we believe we have more than enough evidence to interdict it. In other words, we, along with other tenderers, by the way, and this is not us fighting their fight, we're not a guns for hire, we're trying to protect the public interest. But from what we've seen and how people have come forward and other whistleblowers have come forward, the evidence is there. Then we will have to go to the courts and ask the courts to halt the contract, to review it. So interdict means bring an urgent interdict to first of all stay the allocation of the contract or the appointment of the contractor while this matter is reviewed in court on how they arrived at their decision and whether there were any transgressions in the PFMA and the tendering process. If there were, hopefully a court will agree with us and have that contract cancelled and it has to start again. But we believe that we've got enough evidence to prove to a court that is the right judgment. We hope that it doesn't have to go there, because I think the Auditor General will see for herself all the stuff that we'll provide her.
Now, Wayne, one of Outa's criticisms is regarding the transparency of procurement processes of the new card system. How do you ensure that your organization's stance is based on objective data and facts rather than opinions? I mean, when you say you spoke to these 25 companies that fell at the wayside, but still attended that briefing, they had an opinion, right? And much of that was not actual fact, or is it?
Yeah, look, Hugo, we certainly do not go on opinions, on hearsay. We engage with whistleblowers every day, and we've got professional investigators and project managers that make sure that we get the facts and that we verify the facts and that we go through all the modus operandi, and what looks like corruption sometimes isn't corruption, or it looks like rigging isn't rigging. So we are very sure that what we've seen, and by the way, this is with whistleblowers who are giving us the hard evidence. It's only after that when we put out and publish our reports and comments, that others come forward that corroborate and give us additional information that solidifies our case. So there's so much here. This is not us trying to protect other tenderers and get business to go anywhere else. This is us, as I said earlier, make sure that the process is followed. We don't mind who gets it, so long as we get this at the best price for the country with the right quality of service, and we just cannot have this manipulation. I mean, they had a budget of 468 million rand. They knew very well what this was going to cost, and yet these tenders are about to be awarded at between 762 and 898 million rand, well over double the price of what they knew that they were budgeting for, because, Hugo, they had two what they call expressions of interest meetings with potential tenderers, two of them, not one, where people come forward and express their interest, and they learn a lot about how much the system is going to cost. It doesn't escalate by 100% in 1 year.
When these issues are largely around government procurement processes, right? Now, obviously, as citizens of the country, we want to make sure that the government does not misspend our money, but there are also interests in private sector, because many of us have counters that we've purchased in listed companies, for instance. So, is there a commensurate amount of corruption or whistleblowing that's going on the other side?
Yeah, look, we've always said that business is the other side of the corruption coin. You know, it takes two to play this game. And that's why we watch these processes. And when we see this manipulation taking place, and the picture is very clear, as the late Pravin Gordhan said, join these dots and you can see very clearly what's happening. The business side of these transactions are found wanting, and so we can see matters like ABB, SAP, McKinsey, KPMG. There's so many companies that one would hold in high regard over the time in during the state capture years that were involved in these transactions on the other side. ABB still paying big fines now, SAP overseas, Hitachi. The list goes on, and they need to be held accountable as well. Our work, though, focuses on where the checkbook is signed. It's the state and the government employees, the public sector, that are allowing the dance to take place in the first place. If we have good governance there, then nobody on the other side is going to be corrupt. If they try and be corrupt, then it's the state's responsibility to catch those people who are offering bribes, follow the due process, and have them arrested. You shouldn't be allowing the bribing to take place in the first place. But yes, it is business that is also involved.